Welcome to Microdose Psychedelic Insights, powered by the Conscious Fund. This is the Cognito series, casual psychedelic conversations on cognitive liberty.
Okay, so we're going live and recording here. Me and Kara Cosco, welcome to Incognito, guest number 3, technically 4. We had a recording glitch earlier. But why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on, Patrick. I'm honored to be one of the first few guests. Basically, I am a branding coach. So a lot of people in the psychedelic space typically haven't known what I've done for work for the past few years. But that's because, I've tended to separate my life as a psychonaut and as a 9-to-5er. But thankfully now I don't have to. So as a branding coach, I really work with wellness entrepreneurs or kind of business leaders in the health and wellness industry. And I help them kind of overcome, hesitation around putting themselves out there, and especially on social media, and really just, creating the kind of thriving heart-centered business that they've always wanted to create using really powerful personal branding. So for me, it's just, it's a joy for me. And there's a lot of people who come to me who want to start like psychedelic branded businesses. So it's very fun and definitely fulfills all of my creative flow as well.
Cool. And so I guess you would have started that, or your journey in psychedelics would have started a while ago, and you just kind of combined it recently to be business and your passion?
Yeah. It's really a whole mindset shift into knowing that you can have it all. You can have your passion, and you can make your rent and do everything that you love at the same time. So yeah, that kind of encapsulates, the best of both worlds.
Cool. I do love making rent every month, a good habit of mine. Why don't you tell
For
the
sure.
listeners just a bit more about how you got into psychedelics originally, and what your path into the industry was, just so everyone else can kind of have that perspective.
Yeah, really good question. Well, when I started working as a career in the corporate world, I just sort of got immersed as an assistant really early on. I was in my last year of my psychology degree out at UBC. And I knew that I didn't think I wanted to be a clinical psychologist anymore, like I was planning on it, because I just saw that there was so much that needed to be done in the terms of, destigmatizing mental health. And I thought that there needed to be a lot more funding brought to the table before, people just try to go about changing the world in clinics. And I thought funding comes from businesses, and businesses are the ones that are really making all of the fast, rapid changes in the world. So I thought, I'm going to immerse myself in business. So I was recruited into a venture capital firm quite serendipitously in my last year. And I started as an assistant, kind of moved up to a glorified assistant, actually became certified as a project manager because I was just found that I could take on so many projects at once. But after experiencing burnout, which is really the inevitable end to taking on so many projects at once and putting on so many hats, I decided to focus only on what I loved, and that was marketing, and then really just work only in companies which I loved, which turned out to be wellness companies. So I worked at Sage Natural Wellness, which is kind of the now international aromatherapy brand for diffusers and essential oils. And that really immersed myself in a world where, yes, I could do what I am good at, which is marketing, actually, and focus on that and do it with people that I actually really wanted to be around and choose to help, which were wellness entrepreneurs, people who are incredibly smart, incredibly well-rounded, incredibly holistic, and certainly have a gift to share with the world. So, you know, in the midst of all of that, I was still always a psychonaut at heart. You know, I was always a very psychedelically open and public advocate for these healing medicines, is the way I see them. I was still volunteering with MAPS. I volunteered with the Zendo Project at Burning Man. I helped set up fundraisers. So I was always, you know, still doing those things. And, you know, even as an undergrad, I started the UBC Psychedelic Society, which is, you know, one of the fastest growing clubs at UBC because of its just esoteric nature. And UBC has thankfully really allowed us to flourish and exist, which has been really cool for them too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Brings up a couple questions for me, but I guess, you know, number one would be, and this seems to hold a lot of people back, is, you know, not wanting necessarily to be so public about their use of psychedelics, or you know, trying to draw that line between personal and professional. So at what point did you make that decision to just, you know, say fuck it and combine the two?
Yeah, well, you know, it kind of required the time's help. So with the help of the time and the help of what was happening on the forefront of the psychedelic renaissance that we are all in, you know, because of the history of psychedelics as medicine with Harvard notably, you know, we're just not going to see the level of vigor and excitement as we've seen in history. We're going to see much more of like a gradual consciousness shifting expansion here. And so as much as, you know, my excited mind all awakened with the light bulb moment, would like to kind of barrel forward and, you know, tell the world, I know that, you know, there are some conversations that just take a little bit more time, and that's okay, because we know it's worth it. And so for me, I guess I really kind of merged that I could. Yeah, I really, you know, in 2015, I was an undergrad student and I was, you know, very fiery and just wanted to just bring about dialogue and discussion in the sense of community with students and faculty and law enforcement and legal perspective with psychedelics. So that's why I started the UBC Psychedelic Society. And as we grew and as psychedelics became known as medicine from the classroom to conferences throughout from 2015 to where we are at right now, you know, you can track it based on how the UBC Psychedelic Society flourished. Like, for example, you know, when we started, we were maybe, you know, had a few members, and then we maybe recruited about like 10 new members a month, and we weren't really hard pressing it because we just knew that, you know, we're not someone that's going to be up there at the front booth on Clubs Day. We're going to be like all the way in the back of the campus, which we were. However, we soon rose, and by the time that I graduated, you know, we were actually recruiting a lot more members. We had hundreds of members actually, and then my co-founder and I were doing a podcast. We did one notable radio interview for UBC, and then UBC sponsored Michael Pollan to come speak at their own radio series. Michael Pollan that time had just released How to Change Your Mind, and everyone was really giddy to, you know, see like a modern international world-class university, like kind of, you know, be inclusive and be accepting of psychedelics as medicine. Like the top minds really know. And then UBC Psychedelic Society, with the great leadership, you know, was able to sponsor the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, which now happens at UBC every year. And also, you know, the president, Michael Oliver, who's a good friend of mine, he's like the right-hand man of Mark Hayden at MAPS Canada. So it's all like tying together really, really beautifully. And it's all in part due to the more research that's been occurring in the psychedelic world, which is fueled by all of the business interest primarily and the funding, because it's super expensive to study psychedelics, which is really interesting because psychedelics on the street are not super expensive to get, but in a research setting, super expensive to study. And it does require people with deep pockets, and usually those are entrepreneurs and business leaders, to make that happen. And then the scientists and researchers get to do their magic and make magic happen, you know, from wisdom leaders from years and centuries and decades past.
No, I completely agree, and I appreciate you saying that because even like I came from cannabis 4 or 5 years ago, and it always seems like with a new emerging industry where there's people that are really into it, there is going to be this clash between new entrants and the old guard. And to me, that doesn't make sense if you want to have an industry that's going to be flourishing and successful and actually give access to the whole world, or at least make them aware of
Mm-hmm.
these new tools and potentials. So that kind of draws. Oh, and then I always forget to mention this at the beginning of the podcast, but we do 10 minutes on each subject. So it's a perfect segue into the 10 minutes on sustainability. And so one question I was thinking while you were mentioning your work in marketing and how you really want to go for it and tell the whole world, but you want to be responsible about it and make sure that they're getting the message where they need to be. So how do you balance those two between really wanting everybody and their aunt to know about psychedelic medicine, but also making sure that that information is being communicated properly and responsibly?
That's a really good question. I mean, usually, like if I were to, for example, have a conversation with my aunt about it, um, um, I always make sure to have the disclaimer that I'm speaking from my own experience. Like, this is my experience, and I am one human being, and everyone is going to have a completely separate and different experience. I don't believe that we should put LSD in the water supply, and I don't believe that psychedelics are for everyone. I don't have that radical viewpoint. Maybe I did at one point for like a brief second, but because I've like trained a compassionate and non-judgmental eye with various different populations. It's not hard for me to see how a kind of blue blood raised on the west side of Vancouver, or in like the Shaughnessy neighborhood would probably have a completely separate experience with psilocybin, for example, than someone like living in the downtown east side of Vancouver. Very, very different experiences and backgrounds and everything. So I always say, this is just literally my experience. And then I share very carefully like what happened for me. And I'll definitely get into some woo-woo, I'll definitely get into some spirituality with it, because I think it's important to recognize that, I'm not an atheistic perspective here. And then I'll usually say, and here's where I'm going to guide you for some resources. I know that, for example, for the average layperson just wanting to know certain questions about dosing or really kind of little things, I would definitely say go to Erowid or Reddit. And if someone's really interested in, say, like healing and therapy, I definitely look at what the Zendo project is up to and look at obviously what MAPS is up to. And then in terms of research, like it's really not hard to just do a little search now and like Google Scholar and find some really cool research, specifically what Johns Hopkins has been up to and NYU. So that's typically how I parse it.
Nice, I like that. And so, a broad question that I like to ask when we get into this, 10 minutes on sustainability is really, when I say that word, people can interpret it so many different ways, but what does sustainability mean to you personally, and how does it relate to your work in psychedelics?
Sustainability, yeah, it is such a big term, and typically I know the term from the green movement worldwide that's been happening in really my lifetime, in the past 20 years for sure, that I've seen. And I would say that, sustainability is a really great word to use other than, green, other than organic, other than natural, because sustainability really means, for me, kind of the balance of ourselves as a collective ecosystem, like what's going to work in the long term. For example, like what comes to mind when I think of sustainability is permaculture. Something that benefits the collective as a whole for a very long time, for the foreseeable future. And so when it comes to psychedelics, there's a few things I think about when I think about sustainability. And one is sustainability in terms of plant medicine wisdom. So I typically think of indigenous cultures and how their wisdom has been passed along through largely like word of mouth and storytelling and just holding space in really immaculate ways that people have been just blessed to be able to receive wisdom from. And people are just blessed to be able to go down to the Amazon and receive these teachings, because it really is a temple experience. It's, you know, like visiting an oracle, like what you hear about in myth and legend. And to be able to receive that kind of guidance, that's just like, you know, like you don't even know how long time has been telling for that wisdom to be passed along, is truly like, that's all the research I need, you know, when I think about like, what's the most ironclad longitudinal double-blind research. And I think shamans, go to the Amazon, like venture into the jungle, really. So sustainability in that for sure. And then sustainability in kind of, you know, like the actual, I would say, sustainability in the actual land. So the actual land where plant medicines are grown, for example. You know, like Brazil has been in trouble for a while now with the current political landscape going on there. And the indigenous tribes and cultures are really at the lowest end of protection when it comes to the political warfare that's going on right now for control of the land of the Amazon. So something really important to know for people is that, you know, if someone, say, has an experience drinking ayahuasca, or, you know, has a mushroom experience, and, you know, they have a light bulb moment where they realize they want to do something that keeps this medicine, you know, to be enjoyed by everyone in an absolutely respectful, ritualistic, and ceremonial way, like in the jungle, the best thing you can do is support indigenous tribes, because they, you know, with very minimal protection, tribes out there right now are fighting for their lives, not only in the season of COVID-19, but also just with the political landscape and how rich that ecosystem of the Amazon rainforest is. There's so much competing pressure by businesses in Brazil and, you know, virtually all over the world, obviously, to grow and harvest and just like strip away the natural nutrients of the rainforest. And that's something that really inspires me when I think about, you know, how can this medicine be enjoyed ceremonially for as long as possible? Well, to keep our eye on the political landscape of Brazil, and that's a sustainable way of thinking about it. It's a sustainable way of thinking about how ceremonial usage can be respected and enjoyed for generations to come, and really just impact more of the world.
For sure, yeah, and that often comes up, I find, is the question of sustainability with these plant medicines. Like if we really are to, you know, make them accessible to a greater population in the world, it's going to have a negative impact, you know, on the ecosystem and where they're being sourced from. So what would you say if you know, in like 30 seconds to a minute, if you were to say, here's the answer, here's what we can do, what kind of advice would you give people to help sort of with that collision?
I would probably say, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so you know, on the topic of sustainable plant medicine, and you know, we're going to have increased demand if everything goes according to the way things are going. So how do we make sure that that increased demand for plant medicines doesn't, you know, destroy the foundation that's been built for centuries, really?
Yeah, I would say thinking about psychedelics as decentralization of consciousness. So so I would start with looking at the history of psychedelics and how, you know, how Harvard psychologists honored ancient wisdom cultures by, for example, bringing in the Tibetan Book of the Dead with psychedelic ceremonial usage. I would also look towards really understanding that how the neurochemistry of psychedelics works is that they are inherently non-addictive. So there's really no benefit from the pharmaceutical industry with psychedelics, which is great because that's an industry that's, I would say, broken. I would say that's not working for people, and people are waking up to that. And then third, I would say the collision can really be, I guess, paused, alleviated, even, minimized entirely by supporting in the ways that we live our lives with Indigenous storytelling and respecting those cultures, respecting the land on which someone takes the medicine, and really tuning into the spirituality of these medicinal experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess really feel them to understand what they're giving you in a sense. So that brings us to part number 3, which is the title of the podcast, The Art of Being Incognito. So there's 2 definitions that Google gave me when I was checking it out. Number 1, the philosophical principle that one's existence is demonstrated by the fact that one thinks. And the second definition is the intellectual process of the self or ego. So I always ask, I like to ask, like, what does that mean to you, and how do you use that art of being incognito in your day-to-day life?
Ego has been something that's been a term coming up for me a lot lately. And I would say, for me, the art of being incognito comes up in how I practice regular non-attachment. So non-attachment is a lifestyle. There's an excellent quote that I have been thinking about a lot recently as I enter this new kind of phase of my life. And it's attached to nothing, connected to everything. And
I like that.
That typically, like a little microcosmic example can be like, for example, like I will be hanging out with some friends of mine, and we can have tea, we can play music, we can, share great memories and tell great stories. And then, if someone has to leave at a certain time, or if people have to say goodbye, or if someone is moving to a different country, just being completely present and happy with them that you had that time with them. And that's my way of showing, in a small way, that I'm connected to everything and attached to nothing.
I like it, being able to let go in a sense. Have you ever experienced on a psychedelic journey, have you ever experienced ego death?
Definitely. Do
you feel like sharing about that?
I definitely
I'm curious.
have. I would say yeah, sure. Yeah. I would say it was probably like the most profound experience I've ever had. And it was definitely like, I couldn't confuse if I was dying or if my ego was dying. That was how pretty like intense it was. Yeah. And, I've had a lot of different kinds of medicine and had a lot of experiences. Though a very early experience on my journey, I was, I think I was 19 or something. And it was 10 grams of psilocybin.
Woof.
So it was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's double a heroic dose. And
that makes you a superhero.
I had a safe container with friends, and and I would say, like, at a level like that, you're basically you're hallucinating for a good 4 to 5 hours, and you're definitely probably going to purge. And thankfully I had a great container of safety and loved ones around me. And I had a moment where about 4 hours in, I was finally asked, do you want to die? Like, in my head. And I said to myself, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure what comes next. Maybe what comes next is going to be really, really awesome. And I thought of all the people in my life that loved me, like my family and friends. And then I thought, no, I want to live. I want to live for them. And then I closed my eyes, and then immediately, as soon as I opened my eyes, the room was back to normal. I felt normalized, and I was just very, very present with my friends the next day.
No kidding. Well, that would be what I follow up asking is like, how did this experience of ego death or sort of dissolving your ego change the way you interacted, not only with yourself, but with family, friends, and just people in day-to-day life? Like, how did that impact you fundamentally?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, because I've had a lot of different medicine journeys and I lead such a very active life, I'm very much an achiever kind of archetype. I would say that profound experience was probably so massively helpful. Oh, I'm starting my video. There I am. I would say that experience was so massively helpful because, yeah, I mean, when you do anything that really tests your boundaries and tests how far you think you can go, you're fundamentally changed by that experience, whether you acknowledge it or not, because your subconscious has told you, you can go there. Like, you can go there and come back and survive, at least as far as you know. And I would say that from that experience, there was a lot of experiences around that time, and I think I can include in that time, where I just realized the profound nature of how important our social relationships are, like how much I value my friendships and the people that I need in my life. And I can tend to go into this zone where at my lowest, worst points, I can tend to think, I can't trust anyone, no one's reliable, I have to do it all on my own. And that's like an act of mine that I've carried from childhood really, really deeply, to be vulnerable. And so for me, I've just found that, the deeper I go in beyond the chrysanthemum, so to speak, I would say that for me, it's been really, really helpful overall of just how much my psychedelic experiences have shown to me how valuable my social relationships are, how important female friendships are, how much I really, really do love my family, even if they don't always understand what I'm up to and what I'm into. And also, growing up as a woman in a very Western values indoctrinated culture of independence and, pulling yourself by the bootstraps and entrepreneurial mindsets into feeling a fundamental knowing, like, I actually want to be a mother one day. I would love to have kids. I look forward to sharing sacred union with a special person in my life. And that's something that it's just been a priceless gift to be able to acknowledge and lean into and be unafraid of. Because I think without that experience, I probably would have gone a long, unknowable sense of time, just feeling like, I just got to keep doing it all myself. And, there are no good men. And, psychedelics showed me, nope, that's just another illusion.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it all is an illusion, whether we like it or not. Right. Very cool. So,
True.
And I really, not to get all meta on you or anything, but we have about 2 minutes left in this very super strict timeline and schedule of this podcast. That's very tightly coordinated. And apologies to anyone watching on YouTube if the video does not work very well. My internet's kind of like a potato. But the audio sounds great. So Mia, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your, perspectives, what you're up to, and maybe just give you a chance to have a final word to all the new friends you're going to make on the internet listening to this.
Sure. Yeah. I love new internet friends. I would say that if I were to share anything with anybody online, I would probably say, I find myself saying this all the time and writing this on walls as well. And that is, put into the world what without you would not exist. That's my billboard for people.
I love it. That's one of my favorite Tim Ferriss quotes and tools or questions and tools of Titans is what would you put on your billboard? So The inner Tim in me is smiling on you for that one. Thank you for sharing.
Love me some Tim. Love what he's doing.
He's a legend. Hopefully, like, God bless, one of these days he'll come on my podcast. We'll see. It's like, I can die happy if that happens.
Yes.
So
Anything's
thank you
possible.
again.
It'll totally happen.
Anything's possible. I gotta manifest it into the, build my own reality, right? And give it to the world. So I really want to just appreciate you coming on, sharing a little bit. And I know you've been on the virtual psychedelics conference before, and we got lots coming up. So hopefully the Microdose audience will get to see you and hear from you again.
I hope so.
Thanks so much, Mia. Adios.
Bye. Ciao.
Thanks for joining the Incognito series, brought to you by Microdose and the Conscious Fund. Visit our website at www.microdose.buzz.